All right, this is Doc V, and this is the Escape course, week 8. We're looking at weights on our algorithms to see how those things can affect our results. Let's check it out. All right, welcome back. Last week we took a look at what those algorithms are, how to use them, how to create scenarios, how they're stored in your particular area with regards to scenarios that you care about, that is, and how to pull those things down and read the results. What we're going to do this week is look at some of the weightings that you can do to adjust how those algorithms work. I mean, just like with any algorithm, I mean, it can be static in form, true, but you can provide means to change or alter them in a way which best suits your scenario, your situation. I mean, there are things that you might care about more than someone else. There are other environments that you might be in that are more sensitive to some concepts as opposed to others. I could say, I mean, a medical institution is different than an elementary school. I mean, the concepts, the environment, the things that they're working on, what they care about are different. Hence, in that particular situation, these algorithms, while these algorithms are generic, okay, they typically can be applied anywhere. There are certain concepts where, depending on where you're at, that would be more important in how the algorithm actually calculates and presents its results. So we will explore all of those things here by using weights, which can control those things right now. All right, so we're going to be taking a look in this lesson. We're going to be looking at the weighting for the algorithms and how it impacts their processing. All right. In the last lesson, we were looking at the individual algorithms. We looked at the reports, how they can stack up in the analysis list. We saw what would happen when we submitted them to Ellie and they start populating the queue. We saw how to do those kinds of things. I mentioned how you could serialize the reports, and when you're supposed to, once you've serialized them, you can paste them inside of the text fields of your lesson assignments when you need to submit, when you're going through the course, when you're doing that stuff. All right, so what we're going to focus on this time are looking at the weights. We're going to go ahead and look at the sCA, bring up the same scenario that we've been looking at. Open up my file. I'm going to select it, copy it. Then I'm going to paste this information and it will load up my report. So remember, when you're looking at in this particular algorithm, there were 5 questions for each of these 4 sections. So 20 questions, all right, is really it comes down to. And there is an ordering to them, and there is presence. So when you run a report, I guess I do have them up here, so you look at the results from when we submitted them to Ellie. So this is what you would look at. This is Ellie using all the data at her that she has available to process our algorithms and return the results. So that's what it looked like when it was looking, when we processed it for the sCA. The presence really looked at how many of the 5 questions, and then by relevance, which specific question was referenced, all right, that you filled out for. It does make a difference depending on how you weighted them. So what do I mean by that? Back in our algorithm, we go to settings using that the gear. we'll find the weights. All right. You're taking a look at this. I mean, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are the question numbers. The second field in each little row. So looking at that first row there, bias, which is corresponding to that one section inside of our algorithm. The 0 would represent the position of the first question. 0, 2 is the presence weight. And then, of course, the last one would represent the relevance weight. So what we're saying in bias, the first question that you have inside of there is the most relevant, which is a 1 weighting, but it's weighted equally with all the rest of the questions at 0.02. How does that work? And what you can really do is change the relevance. Maybe you don't want the first question to be as relevant as it is. Maybe you want that to be the least relevant. Maybe you don't want the weights to be associated as they are. I mean, maybe you don't want them to be as equal as you see. So what you can do is alter the weights. I saved the weights off already to another file. So I'm going to remove these and put in new weights. So what I did was kept the ordering of the question the same, but I changed each one, for all intents and purposes, a weight of 0.1, with exception of the last one. I stacked that up, make that a 0.6. So you add it up there, it equals a 1. That's what that actually is. That's why they are. That's what the weights are. And what I did was change the relevance of change the weights for the relevance. So the first question is the least relevant, and now I've made the last question the most relevant. And it actually has the most presence weight. So that's how you can change it. That's how you adjust it. In this particular instance, with the weighting now, it's double standards and stereotypes. That's actually not as relevant as are there homogenized viewpoints? As their weights are set up right now, this is the most important, all right, the most relevant. And 1, 2, 3, all right, that would not be, they all have the same 0.1 weight, whereas this bottom one has a 0.6. Go look back at it. We'll see the last question is the most relevant, and it's actually weighted the most. And so what does that actually do with regards to our processing? Well, let's check it out. Uncheck that the weights only are recognized. They are only relevant when they are submitted to Ellie. So let's go ahead and submit it. No. I need to make sure the AI are actually online. All right. Ellie's up line. So now we're taking a look at the SCA, and let's take a look at the accusium. So we've already submitted the SCA. I'm going to pull up the information that I saved. Going out to my file, copy, then I'm going to paste it in, and then load it. All right, so let's take a look at the weights in this thing. What do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 individual things in a survey. There were drop-down lists, right? So if you're looking at the weights, we have our profile. This is where we actually have the weights. So what happens, you have 3 real sections in the profile. The green line area, authoritative area, and the ideological area. So the accusium will look at, as it's processing our survey, it will look at those individual sections, and you can assign different weight values for those sections. All right. So let's say like you had the green line area here. You could adjust the the weights so that they don't have as much of a bearing on the processing. I mean, you could put it at 0.5 in that particular instance. So I change the green line area to 0.5, well then the green line value, as the algorithm is processing, is only has half of the weighting as the ideological portion. So the same thing applies to some of the other things inside of the survey as well. All right, when you're actually executing and answering the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up some weights that I already had previously saved. I'm going to open that file, copy, save, and then paste. So why would you set those weights that you want here? So I'm going to say the ideological portion, which is at the bottom, only has half the weight as the green line. I mean, that's what I have here. So when we're looking at the survey, when the action taking place and who gains, who loses, those don't have as much value as, let's say, the action or who's going to benefit. And with regards to the location, I don't care about it at all, so it has a weighting of 0. I'll go ahead and submit this, and then we'll resubmit it to the AI, unchecking, and then submit it. All right, so we have the sCA and the QGIM over here. Let's go back and take a look at the equilage now and do the same thing. I'll go ahead and open. I'll go out to my file where I saved my information. Copy, select, and paste, and then OK, and load it. So I have all the information that I have from the report that I submitted earlier. We have 10 individual elements inside of the equilage survey. Let's go back and look at the survey. The profile is there, same thing as the QGIM, but the weights are slightly different. We don't really look at the green line, the authoritative, or the ideological area of the profile for all intents and purposes. What we're actually doing here is looking, we're looking at the ideological portion of the profile, which establishes your individual equilibrium. But the questions in the survey work in conjunction with what you'll find in the ideological portion of the profile. You could weight each individual question in the survey accordingly. So we'll go ahead and change these. I have some weights already set up, just as I did with the other two algorithms. If you look at number 1 and number 2, inside of the survey, those ones deal with liberty. And then the next 4 have to deal with justice. And then the last 4 have to do with altruism. All right, so what I've actually done here is set I've set liberty to be less weight than justice, to be perfectly honest with you. Justice is maxed out, but I have liberty cut in half. 0, the value for each one of these weights would be 0 and 1. 1 is the max and 0 is the lowest. So that's what I actually have my weights here. I go ahead and click, and then I will resubmit it to the AI, uncheck that, submit it, and it should throw it inside of my queue. So now I have all 3 algorithms sent over to Ellie for her to evaluate. So we'll check out what these results are going to look like now that our weights have been changed. Okay. Ellie's looking at it. All right. So Ellie should be done with evaluating them, and you see that they are ready. And we can click our button and download our reports and then take a look at what we got. So I open up each one. We'll look at with the sCA, what we're looking at here, because of the weights that we changed, we'll look at the old one. It was at 15%, with regards to presence, and then relevance was 25%. But because of the way we changed the weights, we can see that the weights did alter depending on how we altered or valued the presence, how we valued the items in the survey, and it altered the relevance. That's how they work. When do you use them? It's up to you. You really decide how best to apply the weights as you're going about executing your algorithms. I mean, we could see here when we did not have weights, just using default weights, looking at there, that's what it's actually doing. It was like 45% sometimes. Ellie was looking at all of the data. That's what it came out to be. Once we changed the weights, depending on what you're looking at, it did alter it. All right, degree of certainty push it up more often now. All right, I mean, so you're more likely to report them. That's kind of what that's looking at here in this particular instance with that particular reporting action. I mean, I don't know how many times I say this. Just keep in mind, this is no substitute for your own thinking. These algorithms are designed to encourage you to look at different perspectives, different viewpoints, look at how things might be taken into perspective with other people. All right. So when we're looking here at the equilage, all right, it did the Ellie evaluated our equilibrium in a more appropriate way, but the scenario, when we use default weights, was placed closer to liberty. Now, thinking when we set the weights in the equilibrium, we altered liberty so that it was cut in half for all intents and purposes. Not 0.1, it's not even half. It's actually 0.3. So because we changed that, it no longer had that weighting. The marker was pulled away from liberty and centering a bit more. So we could see that our equilibrium is still the same. Our equilibrium wasn't affected by the weights, but the weighting for the scenario, that was affected, okay? So that's what you're talking about with regards to the weights and how they could be used and how you could adjust them. It really depends on context, what you're going for, where you're at, what organization you might be in, your time in life. Indeed, even when you're looking at the accusium, one thing you keep in mind is we're not static people. Everybody changes. Our income changes, the way we live changes, our education levels change, even our ideological outlook on life shifts depending on time. So keeping all those things in mind, change is the only real constant. And the algorithms are designed to be able to change with you. And you can adjust the weights to refine them even further. And that's what we're talking about with regards to weights. And that'll be that. So there you have it. And that's our weights that's our weights affecting our algorithms, which will generate different results depending on context, environment. That's going to be it. I mean, this is our 8th week. We've gone through lots of things inside of this course. We rounded it up by introducing the algorithms to help drive home some of those concepts. And then we used weights to explore how we can tailor them to our specific needs. I want to thank you for spending time with me through these 8 weeks. I mean, you have one final assessment that needs to be done next week in week 9. That's just a final test of your knowledge. I mean, everything's open notes in this particular course anyway. But nevertheless, the thing it is there. Okay. What would I want? What would I hope? I would hope that after going through this course, you would explore some of these things. You'd be able to understand perspectives of people different ways. You'd be able to look at scenarios and start to break it down in terms of maybe liberty, altruism, and justice. You'd be able to look at these things and try and understand your decisions a bit more with looking at how it might be, how actions might be affected by who's responsible or who is affected. How broad are the outcomes, so on and so forth. That's all we need in society, to be able to understand and actually relate to one another. Again, I want to thank you for the time that you've spent here with me, Doc V. We will be having lots more videos over time centered on current events through our forums inside of Provea Tech Social on our site. And I say until then, jfytyos.